Hello guys, welcome back to You in Consulting. Well, a couple of you have messaged me telling me that Jack, we love your videos, they are so funny, you are so smart and so on. And you said you would like to find out a bit more about my background, who I am, what I did and so on. And actually I thought, that's cool. Let me tell you a bit more about myself and my own story. But I wanted to do it in a way where I also deliver value to you and so that you can learn how to build your own career path. And also you may be interested in the consulting career. So I thought I'd give you some tips as usual, how to nudge your way into it and get into a fast track into McKinsey, BCG or Bain. For this video, I want to share with you my honest self-assessment if my CV was really good enough to join McKinsey. So for those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Jack. I spent 5 years as a consultant and project manager with McKinsey and now serve as an independent freelance consultant. So obviously the answer to the question is yes, my CV obviously was good enough to join McKinsey, but it's not so easy because actually I made my life way harder than I could have done. I found out that I wanted to become a consultant during the middle of my academic career. I didn't come from a business family background. I had to find out mostly everything myself. So I did some mistakes. I did some stuff right, luckily, but I could have done so much better. For those of you who want to become a consultant, you can make your life so much easier. It's not about building a CV that gets you invited to the interviews because that's just the lower bar. You want to have a CV that is so amazing that the top consulting firms or other top firms can't resist hiring you. And yes, of course, you always have to pass the case interviews. But if you are what I call an irresistible candidate, your profile is so interesting, the bar will be lower for you in the interviews as well, because these firms want you because they know they can sell you well to their clients. And I want to teach you how you can build that for yourself and also what I did right and what I did wrong. So let me get started here. And I bring here my list of evaluation criteria. These are the criteria by which the consulting firms assess your CV and plot you against your competitors. So let me start here with my high school grades. You can see here I start way in the past. I get the question what's happening if back at school I was a bad student and so on. And it is an important criteria. It's because you compete with many bright applicants. The top consulting firms can indulge in the luxury to look at this criterion as well. And for myself, I am lucky here because I always was a very good student. So this is a certificate from my high school telling that I was second best in my year. Just so you know, actually I collected this certificate years after leaving my high school when I was applying for the top consulting firms, because by that time I found out this actually matters. So I mean, here in the US, you probably get all these rankings all the time and so on, but in Germany is not so performance-oriented, so I really had to go back to the secretary and say, hey, like some years back here, I was your student. Can you maybe write a certificate for me so I can add it to my applications? And this worked out. So obviously, I had a top rank, so that was a good thing to have. And also later at university, I continued with my good academic performance. So I finished my studies of economics as best out of 200 students. And I only found out the relative ranking through asking my department, where do I stand? Is there any information and so on? And when they printed for me on my personal demand this list, which actually says I was on top of my cohort. And again, if you were in the US, you probably will get flooded with awards and certificates. Correct me in the comments. But I always thought you guys are way more oriented towards promoting excellence. Again, here, if you don't have this, take initiative and try to collect such a certificate. Maybe now you ask, okay, great, Jack, you had this super amazing grades. How can you get them? I actually can say a bit more about this at the end of the video, but just so I tick the boxes here. Luckily, I did my job, my homework. I was a good student at school and university. Now, another criterion that is a bit more subtle is your university subject. So because the top consulting firms typically tell you, oh man, I mean, just be amazing whatever you do. If you're excellent in whatever subject, you will be a suitable candidate for us. Of course, the consulting firms want to keep their hiring scheme as open as possible, as universal as possible, because then they can attract all the bright minds. But factually, when it comes to selection, consulting firms, of course, need to check which candidates will later be most presentable to their clients, right? And also, do they bring their skills required to be a consultant. A significant part of a consulting job is to perform quantitative analyses. And so if you study a university subject that helps you to hone your quantitative skills, will help you both during the interview stage, but also later during your consulting career. But then also many of the consulting firms' clients nowadays are from industry, from tech, and it helps if you can present an engineer or like say an information scientist or whatever, because the client will think, okay, cool, this person probably speaks my language. I said economics because I was curious about business and economics. I already said I didn't have any family background in there. I was just driven by curiosity. I would not study it again. The main reason is, of course, many business students manage to join a consulting firm or have a very great business career. It is just, you don't differentiate yourself so much from others because there are just so many business students. And if you study a subject that is maybe a bit more specific in a sought after niche, maybe with some kind of cool technical skills as well, beyond the business part, that most probably makes you more attractive. So I mean, still the majority of consultants have a business background, but you compete with many other business students. If you study a more niche subject, maybe STEM subject or so on, you have a much smaller cohort you compete against and you kind of stand out. You have a more unique profile, so to speak. Economics has the special disadvantage that I felt I was always lumped together with the business students, in the sense that in my interviews, people always expected me to know the same as business students, which I clearly didn't. I didn't do any case study training in my courses, and also economics is a very theoretical discipline. At the same time, I think for business students, generally the bar is a bit higher on the case interviews because they kind of expect you to know how to approach business problems. But as an economist, you don't really deal so much with practical business questions. So I felt it was a bit discounted in a way. What's good about economics, it's a very mathematical subject. It's very quantitative, teaches you to think in systems. But I think it's in the middle. You can do better choices for a university subject. Then my university degree. So maybe you will be surprised again that I rank my PhD as an average degree. Of course, it's not an average degree, it's the most advanced degree you can pursue if you don't become a professor and so on, of course. So of course, it's a good degree. But the question is it really like helpful to get into MBB? And I would say so. The best time to join a consulting firm is after you finish your master's degree. Because this is when you're not so experienced yet. So consulting firms love to shape your profile. I mean, you can still be influenced. You have a lot of time to develop and so on. If you join with an advanced degree, such as a PhD or an MBA, the bar is already a bit higher when you join because you're expected to know more, but you have less time to develop early consultant skills. Just you have to grow into a project manager role or whatever faster. Also internally, your hiring price is typically higher comparing with the guys coming just with a master's degree. So it's a bit more difficult at the beginning to kind of compete with the others. Maybe it's a bit too complex. I should maybe do another video on that. And also for the consulting firms, it's a bit more difficult to make you sign up to the same value scheme, because when you are a bit more mature already, you're a bit more confident, and it may take more time for the company to kind of, I don't want to say equalize you. I should do another video on that. But actually, I would say consulting firms have their career development programs tailor-made for people who join with a master's degree. Of course, you can also join with a bachelor's degree or an MBA degree or whatever, but it's a bit already to the fringes. Let me leave it here before I ramble on. Now, another criterion obviously is the university that you have studied at. I say obviously now, because I didn't know when I started to study. So I actually must tell you or confess to you, I had a very good high school degree. I could have studied more or less any subject at any school in Germany. Okay, then I have this idea to study economics, which actually you can study with any degree. For certain degrees in Germany, you have to reach a certain minimum grade to be qualified to join, but actually economics is open to anyone. And then, because economics is so similar at different schools, I thought the first 2 years of my study program were the same everywhere. I just choose a city that is beautiful. So I moved to southern Germany and just chose a city that seemed beautiful and didn't really care much about the reputation of a university or so on, because it was anyway more or less the same. And then later on, after 2 years, I wanted to change university. I started my career by at University of Heidelberg, which is actually a good university. Also in economics, it's okay, but it's nothing super famous or anything. And then I changed to University of Bonn, which is a very well-reputed school in Germany for studying economics. It's also rather quant heavy. The main reason because I went there was because I had a great freedom to design my own study program. I didn't like many schools where actually I had to just do what people demanded from me. I wanted to have more freedom to shape my own course of studies. Still, Bonn wasn't really a target university because both in Bonn and in Heidelberg, funnily, I think there are still no engineers, and there are also no business students. The consulting firms usually like to hire from the top German business schools as well as some STEM schools. They just wouldn't have my schools on the radar, and I could have initiated contact with them just by going to a campus where I just happened to meet them naturally. So in that sense, I was very lucky to later join Imperial College. But actually, when I was in Bonn, I actually also did a study abroad. Then after another year, so I went for 1 year to Finland, to the University of Jyväskylä, which is the oldest school in Finland. And the reason I went there, because Bonn offered a couple of exchange programs, also with Berkeley, California, for which potentially I could have qualified as well, which, as you know, is one of the best schools for economics worldwide. But I didn't even apply because I felt, I've never heard about this Jyväskylä. And I thought, okay, let me take the path less taken. I think it was even the only school in the Bonn exchange network where more people came from to Bonn than people from Bonn went to. So I really took the kind of the outsider school, but nobody knew. I had a lovely time in Finland, and it was a good year because I improved my English and so on. And also, I went abroad, but also it's like ticking a box. But again, I didn't play the signaling game at all yet, because I could have gone to a school where I appear pre-selected in the sense that I show to McKinsey later, whoever, I managed to get into that school, or like I managed to get into that exchange program. I didn't demonstrate anything like that. I was very lucky then that I managed to get from University of Bonn to Imperial College London for my PhD, also with a full scholarship, because Imperial College London is one of the top 10 schools worldwide, regularly confirmed rankings and so on. So all of a sudden I was at a target school, and I was like, oh man, what's going on here? Like every evening I can have dinner with another bank, consulting firm, whatever, industrial company. So many want to hire you, and I realized the contrast, right? Fun fact though, Imperial College in London is still not a super target uni for, I say, McKinsey, BCG, Bain there, because London is so competitive, and there's actually like a kind of comparatively few positions compared to the number of qualified applicants. And MBB loves to hire from Cambridge, Oxford. And so I thought, I don't want to take that risk. I said I apply in Germany to McKinsey and the others, because I felt maybe my PhD degree from Imperial College London would be more appreciated in Germany than it would potentially be in London. Anyway, so I kind of made a late saving, because I'm not sure if I only had studied in Germany with the 1 year in Finland, I don't think I would have stood out sufficiently compared to all the others who attended target schools in Germany and elsewhere. What I did correctly though, I did a couple of internships, actually 4, and they were all relevant. So my first internship was actually with a smaller medium-sized industrial company in Heidelberg. It was fun. They created printing machines, and I was in controlling, and it was actually quite challenging. But in the end, I managed to get it done. Later they told me the job was so difficult. They already had hired 2 interns before me, and they all failed. And I managed, and in the end, I was allowed to present my results at some kind of controlling day with like, I don't know, 50 controllers from all Germany. And they applauded me for my presentation, so it was really soothing. That was my first internship. But then the other internships, the next 3 were all in consulting. So I did 1 internship with EY in transaction advisory services, so business valuation, so to speak. Then I did 1 internship with a small consulting firm that was founded by former McKinsey BCG partners. And I was on a consulting project with a former BCG project manager. I was alone there, and he taught me so much. It just was amazing. And then after I finished my studies of economics at Bonn University, so between my academic degree in Bonn and my master's degree and my PhD in London, I did an internship with Roland Berger, which I think most of you know is one of a major tier 2 consulting firms, and catapulted me into the Olymp of consulting firms because I did a super cool project there. And I signaled basically I know what consulting is about. So this is something that you also definitely want to do. Collect relevant internships. Doesn't have to be all in consulting. You can also work with potential consulting clients. Maybe also in startups if you think you learn skills that are sought after in consulting, but I definitely had relevant work experience. Scholarship. That's an interesting story because I remember how I was sitting in one of my McKinsey job interviews, and I could see that the interviewer was holding a piece of paper, and I could see some kind of star graphic here. And I could see that for all dimensions, I seemed to be rather far outside. So probably the HR department had kind of prepared, like based on my CV, a little graphic showing how well I perform on certain criteria compared to others. But for one dimension, the star was kind of inward. So in one dimension, I failed. And actually, I was cheeky enough to ask my interviewer, hey, I see the star graphic. And what's going on there? Because I see to be very good on most criteria, but not on this one. I asked him what it was. And he said, scholarships. And I was like, hey, how can that be? Because when I went to Imperial College, I actually won an award, a 3-year award for my PhD, covering tuition fees and living expenses, which I think is pretty great. It felt like winning the lottery back then. But what I had not done, so in Germany, there's a couple of large scholarship foundations funded by political parties and some independent bodies, and they typically promote people with excellent academic records and also voluntary work, engagement and so on. Often you join these organizations as an early student, maybe just after you finish high school or in your first or second year of studies. And these bodies are great because, they give you kind of, depending on your financial background, a certain smaller or larger monthly allowance. But that's not the point. These foundations, at least in Germany, you may have something similar in your country, they promote your studies, but also your development as a young leader. You have summer schools, certain topics, you maybe have language courses. They also fund tuition fees for, like, say, if you want to go abroad to the US, it's super expensive. Sorry, guys, but at least that's the European perspective. And they fund your tuition fees over there. Also, I think the most invaluable thing is that you get access to mentors because there's many alumni in these foundations, they hold speeches. It's an own network. Can you believe that I never even applied to these foundations? The reason is because in the beginning you had to be suggested. You had somebody to suggest you. And I felt a bit intimidated because in Heidelberg I started my academic career in economics with 500 students. I managed to already get 2 letters of recommendation to go to Finland for my study abroad, and I felt like, I don't want to bother these professors too much. So I was a bit intimidated to just ask people. And I really regret this because, again, I could have made my life so much easier, not just for the signaling, in terms of, yes, look here, I managed to join such a foundation. At McKinsey, I was impressed by how many of my colleagues had also been in such a foundation. And it makes sense in hindsight because, again, MBB likes to see if you have already managed to get admitted to other competitive bodies, be it like universities, scholarship foundations, companies, and so on. Because when we know others have endorsed you already, and so there's a lower risk to hire you because you kind of have pre-qualified, been pre-selected. The second thing, of course, is like, you have this alumni network and people, you get mentorship and so on. Really, I missed out, and I still regret actually because I think I love these networks and talk to these people and also share. So I use my YouTube channel. I have my own networks, but this is something like I felt like I should have had the courage to go there. Now the system has changed. You can also apply to certain foundations yourself, which I think is good. Anyway, then there's a very important box, of course, about your extracurricular activities. There are certain things you need to do, like to tick the box, but of course, there's many great candidates applying to top firms, top consulting firms. How do you differentiate yourself? And one way to do that is to kind of have interesting extracurricular activities. Now, hopefully you find something that kills 2 birds with a stone, in the sense that there's something you enjoy privately, but that also makes you look good on your CV. And in my case, I managed to earn some awards. In the sense, I later won an essay competition at a private business school as an outsider. That was helpful. I also got into a McKinsey-sponsored competition. I managed to become one of the 20 finalists And of course, it was very helpful to get so advanced in this competition. I also speak some formal languages such as Spanish. Also, there was a time in my life where I could hold conversation in Chinese because I went twice for short periods to China. So I think also, of course, qualified me a bit like that I'm probably smart if I managed to learn such a language that is commonly understood to be difficult to learn. When I was a PhD student, I organized a conference on sustainable business. As many high-profile speaker, I was, say, lead organizer of a conference. So a lot of stuff that I did and that I also leveraged in my CV later. Yeah, and then also something I did well. When I was committed that I want to become a top management consultant, I actually attended many recruiting events sponsored by the consulting firms. So I attended the so-called flagship events with almost all of the top consulting firms. And I mean, flagship event means like it's very competitive. It's even more competitive than applying for a job. If you get admitted, they ship you to kind of a cool location. In my case, somewhere in Europe, like to a 5-star hotel. When you have a workshop for 2 or 3 days, which is super interesting. You meet many interesting people, learn a lot, party as well. And then typically you have to solve a group case competition. You don't sleep that much. But for your CV, I always advise to include the fact that you have attended these recruiting workshops if they have been competitive, because the other consulting firms know anyway, they know anyway you apply to all of them because everybody does that. Or most people, but they also know that you are such an attractive candidate that also others would like to hire you. They even invite you to these very exclusive workshops, and so they also qualify you again as a very interesting candidate. So I think these are some of your criteria that consulting firms assess your CV and rank you against other candidates. And as you can see, I mean, some of these decisions you take early, some of these you can correct also now with bachelor master. If you think you took like maybe not such a cool first degree, you can still change. And it's just the earlier you become aware of this, the easier you can make your life later. Because obviously if you meet consulting firms early in your career, if you get invited to exclusive events, if you kind of collect these what I call pre-selection badges, you just become a candidate that the top consulting firms just can't resist hiring, and you stand out and your profile is unique. And then yeah, you still have to pass the case studies, but they'll maybe become a piece of cake because I mean you're such a strong candidate. And I would say I did some stuff well. I was a good student, but I was a good student at not so famous schools. I mean, there's always a good student at any school, right? So if you just do the maths, there's probably less positions that McKinsey offers than good students in Germany. And also my degree, I think today I would study something else. And I should have gone abroad earlier, I would say. I should have applied for scholarships earlier. But I think I late also during my PhD when I was at Imperial in London, I caught up with a lot of things I could have done earlier. Well, and if you like this video so far, actually don't forget, please leave a like, subscribe for further top quality career advice, not just consulting, and of course also share if you like. That's always welcome. And I would like to make you aware, a little pitch here, that I recently published my second online course in which I teach you how to build the perfect CV. And I already said this constructs the fast track into McKinsey BCG and Bain. I mean, don't just think you need to start when you prepare for the interviews and when you practice the case interviews and so on. Yes, of course, that's super important, but you have such an advantage. You made the commitment to become a consultant earlier and think through the whole process and what they truly want from you. And that is the purpose of my online course. And just as a brief summary here, so what you learn and what you get out of from this course. So you understand what the MBB truly want. Because these companies often don't tell you the truth about what they want. It's not true that everybody has the same odds of getting in, and I take you behind the scenes. And then I encourage you and advise you to build a master plan as early as possible. And actually, I have some tools where you find out analytically where you stand at the moment and also where you should increase on the criteria I share to go into the top rank everywhere so that you become that irresistible candidate. This is, of course, relevant for people who are early in their academic career. Don't despair if you are about to apply, even if you're soon graduating for your master's degree or actually are finished, or you want to join as an experienced hire. There's still stuff that you can do better and change. And even if you think you can't change that anymore, there's ways how to position your unique talents and skills. So in my course, I advise you what parts of your previous experience are relevant you should kind of point out and which ones you should rather hide or at least not emphasize. That's more or less the first part of my course. The second part of my course deals with how to upgrade your own CV, your resumes, and your application documents, also your cover letter and so on. How can you now make it shine the best way? And I mean, I screen many CVs. I have seen better ones, worse ones, and so on. I know my stuff very well here. And I actually have prepared for you a consulting ready template, but it's not just about having a template for your CV. You also want to know how to fill it section by section. What are the things the consulting firms look at? How to write stuff and which to pick, how to phrase it and on, and what section to put first. All the details really. And I think it's super important. The same I do for your cover letter. And then besides the templates, I also take down my own trousers in the sense that I actually talk you through my own application documents that I used to apply to McKinsey and get a job at McKinsey. And in this sense, always, I don't want to just talk about myself, but the point is, what can you learn from my approach and apply in your own CV? This is my invitation. So this course is suitable for everybody who has not yet hit the submit button. If you have not yet submitted, then the course is for you. And also, I wanted to make sure that my course is affordable. So check it out. A link in the description below. I think it's a student price because I really want to spread the word. And that's so much. Check it out. And just wanted to say you in case you are still a student earlier in career and you want to find out, Jack, how did you manage to get to these top degrees, like top student at school, top student at university? I've created a video in which I teach you my strategies on how to become a 1% student. Another thing, if you want to join MBB as an experienced hire, I've also made a video already, quite popular, in which I give you tips how to apply as an experienced hire. So check out these two videos and like, subscribe, and hope to see you back here on Consulting soon. Jack.